Nights where the mask felt too heavy. Nights where you wanted to flip the board, reveal yourself, let them see what they'd been sleeping on all these years. The temptation to prove yourself was constant. That burning need to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be respected. But you held the line, because you understood that premature revelation is suicide on the chessboard. You understood that exposing your queen too early gets her captured. You understood that patience isn't passive, it's the most aggressive form of strategy. Every day you didn't reveal yourself was another day they dug their own graves deeper. They made enemies, thinking they were untouchable. They burned bridges, thinking they'd never need to cross back. They collected debts they thought they'd never have to pay. And through it all, you watched. You waited. You positioned your pieces with surgical precision while they partied in their palace of sand. The middle game taught you something about power. Real power isn't loud. Real power doesn't announce itself. Real power moves in silence, builds in darkness, strikes from angles that shouldn't exist. They had the appearance of power, the titles, the money, the influence, but you were building actual power. The kind that doesn't need a name tag. The kind that operates whether anyone sees it or not. They thought the game was about controlling the center of the board. You knew the game was about controlling information, and you had all of it. Every piece of leverage, every secret alliance, every contradiction between what they said publicly and what they did privately. You were sitting on a mountain of ammunition, and they kept handing you more. Sometimes they'd test you. Not consciously, they still thought you were harmless, but sometimes they'd throw something your way that required more intelligence than your mask allowed, and you'd fumble it. Deliberately. You'd stumble just enough to maintain the illusion. You'd ask a stupid follow-up question. You'd let your eyes go vacant at precisely the right moment. Acting dumb is exhausting work. It requires more intelligence than being smart, because you have to constantly calculate what a dumb person would do, what a dumb person would say, what a dumb person would miss. You have to suppress every instinct that wants to solve the problem, answer the question, expose the flaw in their logic. But the exhaustion was an investment. Every drop of energy spent maintaining the mask was a deposit into an account they didn't know existed, and that account was collecting interest. Compound interest, the kind that turns small advantages into overwhelming force over time. 5 years of middle game, 5 years of watching and waiting, 5 years of being the person they never worried about, while they destroyed each other competing for positions that wouldn't matter when the end game arrived. And you could feel it coming. That shift in the air, that subtle change in the board position, the moment when all your patient positioning would finally pay off. The moment when the mask could finally fall. The end game was approaching. And they still had no idea. Someone powerful just realized, not suspected, not wondered, realized. The kind of realization that makes your blood stop moving. The kind that rewinds every interaction, every conversation, every moment they thought they were alone with their schemes. The kind that makes you question your entire understanding of reality. It happened recently. Maybe yesterday. Maybe an hour ago. Maybe they're reading something right now that finally connected the dots. And the picture forming in their mind is shattering everything they thought they knew about you, about themselves, about this game they thought they were winning. The end game is here. And they just realized they never stood a chance. How did it happen? Does it matter? Maybe someone talked. Maybe they finally noticed a pattern. Maybe they saw you do something you shouldn't have known how to do and the mask slipped for just a second. Maybe they stumbled on something you built in the shadows. Maybe they finally asked themselves a question they'd been avoiding for years. What if we were wrong about them? And once that question takes root, it devours everything. They're going back now, mentally retracing. Every meeting where you sat silent, were you gathering intelligence? Every mistake you made, was it calculated? Every time you asked for help, were you testing them? They want to confront you. They're burning to demand answers. Who are you really? What do you know? What have you been doing all these years? But they can't, because confronting you means admitting they were fooled. It means acknowledging that someone they considered beneath them outplayed them on every level. Their pride won't allow it, so they have to sit with it, swallow it, choke on questions they can't ask. And you don't have to say a word. That's the beauty of the end game. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to reveal your strategy. You don't need to gloat or lecture or prove anything. The position speaks for itself. The board speaks for itself. They can see now what they should have seen a decade ago. They were never in control. Some of them will try to salvage something. They'll suddenly want to be your friend. They'll remember old kindnesses they manufactured on the spot. They'll act like they always knew you were special, always saw your potential, always believed in you. Let them perform. Let them embarrass themselves with revisionist history. You know the truth. They know you know. And that knowledge is a blade they'll feel every time they see you. Others will go the opposite direction. They'll try to discredit you before you can use what you know. They'll spread whispers, plant doubts, paint you as unstable or dishonest or dangerous. Let them. The more noise they make, the more obvious their fear becomes. The more they attack, the more they confirm that you have something worth attacking. Their desperation is your validation. But most of them, the smart ones, the ones who've survived this long by reading situations correctly, they'll go quiet. They'll watch you the way you watched them. They'll wait to see what you do next. They'll recalculate every assumption they've ever made about power, about intelligence, about the quiet ones in the corner who never seemed like a threat. You've changed their reality, not with a speech, not with a confrontation, not with any dramatic reveal. You changed it by simply existing as something other than what they decided you were. You changed it by being patient when everyone else was rushing. You changed it by playing a longer game than they knew existed. And now they have to live in a world where you're not who they thought, where their judgment failed them, where their precious intelligence missed the most important player on the board. The greatest checkmates are silent. No crowds cheering, no trophies raised. Just the quiet click of the final piece moving into position and the soft exhale of someone who realizes it's over. That's where you are now, standing over a board they didn't know they'd lost, watching them search for moves that don't exist. You don't need to announce your victory. You don't need to explain your strategy. You don't need them to acknowledge what happened. The position is clear. The game is decided. And every second they spend trying to figure out what went wrong is another second they're not spending on recovery. You played dumb for over a decade. You absorbed their condescension like fuel. You converted their disrespect into motivation. You turned their blindness into your invisibility and moved through their world taking everything you needed while they thought you were taking notes you couldn't understand. And now someone powerful knows. Now the whispers are starting. Now the careful ones are reassessing. Now the throne they built on the assumption of your irrelevance is shaking beneath them because that assumption was the foundation. They wanted to keep you small. They wanted you grateful for whatever scraps they tossed. They wanted you dependent on their approval, their access, their definition of your worth. But you were never dependent. You were never small. You were a queen disguised as a pawn, and they spent a decade teaching you how to defeat them. What happens now? Whatever you decide. That's the position you've earned. That's the freedom a decade of discipline purchased. You can reveal everything, or reveal nothing. You can use what you know or let them wonder forever. You can build something they can't touch, or simply watch them destroy each other now that fear has replaced their confidence. The board is yours. The game was always yours. Yours. They just didn't know they were playing.